Sometimes it's so easy to become offended. And so many times when we become offended, we don't even realize anymore that we're acting out of offense or responding to people through an offensive heart. I remember one time I was confronted with my pastor on something that he told me I was offended about. And if you know me, you know that I don't get offended very easily. Like almost ever do I get offended because I don't know, just something about my personality that I just don't really get offended. I allow things to easily roll off my back, and I really don't like to have conflict with people. I like to be a peacekeeper. So it's very rare that I become offended with someone. And I was talking to my pastor, my boss, as many of you know, my dad, and I remember him telling me, "You're offended at that person." I was like, "No, I'm not. I don't ever get offended." And he was like, "You are." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And he's like, "I can tell that you're offended by the way that you're responding through this or responding about this situation." And I remember at that moment in my life, I was like, "Oh my gosh. He's right." As much as I don't want to admit it, he's right. And what that person did actually offended me. And because I allowed that offense into my heart, I actually started responding to every situation with that person out of an offended heart. So anything that they said to me or any email I received from that person, I was reading it through an offended heart, or if you want to say I was reading it through an offended eye. And when that happens, that becomes a problem. Of course, there's going to be times in our life that people are going to offend us and people are going to say things that might rub us the wrong way. Because as we all know, people are people. But what we do with that offense is up to us. And I love this scripture in Matthew 5:23-24. It says, "Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go your way first. Be reconciled to your brother and then come and offer your gift." It's so important what we do with offenses or the relationships that we have. We can't allow offenses to stir into our heart because as you realize here, the title of this chapter that this scripture actually comes from, it says, "Murder begins in the heart." We have to realize that the condition of our heart is very important. And it's easy to say, well, but that's something that's going on with them. Well, something that's going on with them, if it's impacting your heart, God says, don't even come here to the altar with your gift. Leave your gift here and go and reconcile that with your brother. Then come back and bring your gift to the altar and offer it to me. So we have to realize that the way that our heart is, the condition of our heart, and what we have going on with people is really important if we want the word to fall on a ground that's able to really receive the word that God has for us in our life, to really become everything that he's called us to be. We have to take a look deep down in our heart and say, do I have an offense that is causing me to see through offended eyes? Do I have an offense that's causing me to see other people not the way that God sees them, but through this offensive eye? We have to really be honest with ourselves. And there's so many different people I could mention in the Bible. One person that comes to me specifically of just all the different people who could have allowed an offense to deter them from everything that God has called them to would be Noah. Because I just imagine Noah had it set in his mind, I am going to do everything that God has called me to do. And he didn't allow anyone to deter him from doing everything that God had called him to do. And as you know, there were so many people that were coming up to Noah through him really doing everything that God had called him to do and saying like, you're stupid, or you shouldn't be doing that, or how can you even be building and spending so much time on building this boat? There's no rain around here. What are you doing? And Noah could have allowed those negative words and that negativity and that laughter and that, things all coming in at him to cause an offense in his heart and really have a hardened heart. But Noah didn't allow that to happen. People were saying things all around him, but he just said, you know what? I'm just going to stand firm on what God has called me to do. And I'm not going to allow their mockery, or I'm not going to allow their laughter and their horrible words against him cause him to get off track from everything that God has called him to do. And we have to realize as Christians, there's going to be people who may laugh at us. There's going to be people who may mock us. There's going to be people who may try to convince us to not do everything that God has called us to do or not become everything that God has called us to be, but we can't allow those words to get into our heart and cause an offense. We have to deal with those situations, if it's someone in your life, you need to go to your brother, your sister, your friend. You have to go to that person and allow that offense to be worked out so that your heart can be softened before the Lord. Because a lot of times we think that offenses, if I can have an offended heart at this person, a lot of times we think that it's going to cause harm onto their life by having an offended heart. But we have to realize that the only harm that's done through an offense is the harm on your own heart and not truly being able to become everything that God has called you to be. I also love this scripture in Matthew 5. Again, it says, "You have heard that it was said to you, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But this is Jesus talking. He says, but I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you." This goes to show that it's so important, not about what people say to us, but the way that we respond and treat those who speak negatively into our lives. So I just want to encourage you that you look into your heart and see if there's any offenses or anything going on in your life against someone else that's causing you to see life through an offended eye, because the only eyes we should have on are the eyes of Christ, the mind of Christ, the heart that's so softened to allow us to see people the way that God sees them. And that in these moments where we may feel like an offense could be created in our heart, to say, you know what, I'm going to love my enemies. I'm going to bless those who curse me. And I'm just really going to show Jesus to the world in which I live and not cause that offense to be put onto other people that's really going to hold you back. But just allow your heart to be softened and say, God, if there's anything in my heart that I need to deal with, Lord, I want to deal with that. So I'm not seeing life through offensive eyes, but God, I'm seeing things the way that you want me to see them.